the conversation around health, I feel, gets overly polarized regarding food and movement. Now, I am not for 1 minute saying that these things are not important, but I think there is far too much focus on them, personally, at the expense of other factors. And here's the funny thing about stress, right? And this is what I really figured out as I was unpacking the book and writing it. Often our food choices, often our movement habits, often why we do certain things is because of the stresses in our life. So, what happens in January? Every January, in the US, in the UK, New Year, New You, time to get healthy. Right, so what are the two commonest things that I see people doing in my clinic? I want to reduce sugar, or I want to reduce my booze. Right, those are the two commonest things. So what is the pattern that I see is this. For a week, for 2 weeks, maybe for 3 weeks, willpower gets them through. It's like, yeah, getting sugar out of the house, I'm not going to have it. This year's going to be different. It's not going to be like the last few years. This year, I get on top of things. Same with alcohol. You know, I'm now not going to drink. Yeah, I've overdone it over Christmas and New Year. That's it now. I'm in. I'm sorting my life out. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then those habits start to creep back in. And my view on that is, in a lot of cases, it's because the sugar or the alcohol was serving a role in someone's life.
Of course.
Of course, I know it's super obvious to say it, but what they're doing is that, and the reason I'm explaining it is I think people will be listening to this and somebody there is going to go, yeah, that's me actually. I do that every January, but I can never get past January the 14th. And if you are using sugar, or if you're using alcohol, or if you're using anything to soothe the stresses in your life, I think many people are going to be very limited in the change they're going to make unless they address the underlying stresses. Address the underlying stresses, then you no longer need to engage in the same behavior. I'll give you another example. I had a patient who was I can't remember his job. He was sort of some sort of managerial position in a company. And he came to see me for a whole variety of different reasons. The point is that when we looked at his lifestyle, it was quite clear to me what was happening. So he would drink a lot of alcohol, and it was affecting his relationship. It was affecting his sleep. It was affecting his performance, right? But he wouldn't drink every day. But what would happen when you looked at his week is he would start drinking on a Wednesday. So what happens when you unpack his life? Wednesday, just after lunch, he has to present a team meeting. He finds it incredibly stressful. So by the end of Wednesday's work, he is super amped up. He goes straight home and he wants to unwind. So he opens a bottle of wine, has a glass, 1 glass turns into 2, 2 turns into 3, and before you know it, Wednesday, he has a whole bottle of wine. Therefore doesn't sleep well, wakes up tired, feeling a bit angsty, needs more caffeine to get him through. By default of that happening, he's quite anxious throughout the day, feeling stressed throughout the day. Because he's drinking caffeine all the way into the afternoon, he then drinks more alcohol on Thursday, affects his sleep, and this pattern continues whereby come Friday, it's 2 bottles of wine, come Saturday, it's 2 bottles of wine, and Sunday he spends just recovering for the week ahead. Now, what did I do? Of course, as you well know, Rich, there are multiple things at play here, but in this particular instance, I helped him. We sort of unpacked his week, and I helped to say, hey, look, it seems that on Wednesdays, things start to go wrong. So, is there something else that we could maybe think about doing to de-stress? And he said, well, we looked at a few options. There was a yoga class.
I was just going to say you should go to a yoga class right after
work. There you go, man. We should swap places, man.
Yeah,
in fact, you go to my clinic. I'll come and live in sunny California.
Keep going.
So what happens next is that he goes, okay, fine. So Wednesday, straight after work, before going home, what does he do? He goes to yoga. He was a little resistant, but again, he was seeking help, so he came to see me. So he goes to yoga. Within weeks, everything changes. When he comes back, he reports what happens. On a Wednesday now, he relieves that stress at yoga. He goes home feeling calm, feeling present, changes his relationship with his wife. He still has a glass of wine on a Wednesday night, but it's 1 glass. Doesn't affect his sleep as much. He feels good on Thursday. Again, he'll have a glass of wine on the Thursday, not the whole bottle. And, ultimately, over the course of a few weeks, it completely transformed things. So that was the trigger point for him in the week. So I hope that people listening to this, someone's going to identify in their own life and go, yeah, wait a minute. That's like a similar pattern for me. Maybe if I can manage my stress in a slightly different way, maybe those knock-on consequences will be different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, look, these are individual cases, but they apply to all of us in many aspects of our life.
Yeah, I think basically what you're doing is you're telescoping up on the whole situation and trying to get at the root causes of these things, so that the solutions that you're implementing are taking into consideration the downstream impacts of these behavior. So instead of just saying, well, don't drink a bottle of wine, you're looking at what is causing the person to make that choice in the first place. And then you see the domino impact either way, either positive or negative to what happens to that, which I think is, I mean, that's the way to address these things, you know?
This has come from experience, because what is all public health messaging? It's, you know, eat less of this, move more. You know, you're drinking too much alcohol. You know, doctors over and over again tell me, this stuff is all great, Dr. Chatterjee, but, you know, patients just don't do what we tell them to do. I would argue that phrasing in itself needs shifting. I generally get really good compliance with my patients. Like, I do not say that to boast. I say that because I really think that when you communicate effectively with them, right, people want to change. People don't want to come in and not follow your advice. People don't want to take half a day off work to come and sit in a waiting room, wait for 20 minutes whilst you're running late to come in and see you so that they can ignore your advice. People want to feel better. That is my number one belief in my job, is that people fundamentally want to feel better. They don't really want to be there. So let me help them feel better.
So what is leading to that idea that patients don't take the doctor's advice? Is it in the delivery, in the manner in which these practitioners are trying to advise the patients? Like, where is that communication breakdown?
Look, I think conventionally, if we look back over the last 30, 40 years, there has been a certain tradition in medicine, this very paternalistic relationship that I have a problem, I come and tell the doctor, he or she is going to figure out what the problem is, give me a diagnosis, and then give me some form of prescription, usually a pill to take to get rid of it. And again, I would make the case that maybe 30, 40 years ago, that worked super well. Like if you were coming in with an acute problem, like a pneumonia, and you know you're coughing, you can't sleep, you've got sweats, hey, doctor, help me. You know, they listen, they make some tests, hey, you have got pneumonia. That's the overgrowth of this bug. I've got a pill for you that is going to kill that bug and you will be better, right? That approach has worked and still does work. Of course, there are unintended consequences of that in the example I gave, but that approach, I think, does work. And the whole medical system, as you've alluded to already, is set up around that model. Mm-hmm. We are not set up, to look for root causes. People online will say, yeah, we are. This is all nonsense. You know, all doctors look for the root cause. I'm sorry, but I disagree, because I know what our training is, and we're not really trained to look at it, because I don't think we had to in the past. So A, I don't think we're trained to do it. B, I don't think the system is set up in a way that allows us to do it. And look, if you are a busy, tired, stressed out doctor, and you have, like in the UK, a NHS GP will see between 30 and 50 patients a day, right? I get it, right? You're sitting there, you've got 5 people waiting outside. The easiest thing in the world, A, is to give a prescription, because you can get that done quickly and run on time and start to build through your backlog. But also, I think the way we're taught and the way often in that rushed setting that we deliver this information is, I think it's destined to fail. Like, if you have a patient, right, who comes in, type 2 diabetes is the obvious example to use, right? The patient's in front of you and you've got their test, right? Let's say they're coming in for some blood tests. They're trying to figure out what's wrong with them, why they're so tired. You run some blood tests and they've got type 2 diabetes, but they don't know this. So I actually do this at role play at the end of the course that I teach to doctors to demonstrate just how different these things can go. So the conventional one is this. Patient comes in, knocks on the door. Hey, Brian, how you doing? Yeah, doc, you know what? I'm feeling knackered. I've got these blood tests. I wonder if I could get the results. Yeah, sure. So without looking at them, looking at the computer, looking at the screen, going, yeah, you know, you have got something called type 2 diabetes, right? That's a chronic illness. it's a bit of a problem because if we don't get on top of it, it may lead to heart attacks. It may lead to amputations in your leg. It's the commonest cause of blindness in this country. So we really need to get on top of it. Now, the good news is we've caught it. I've got some drugs for you. We're going to start you today on metformin. Normally, within a couple of years, we need to add a second drug. Sometimes we then have to go to insulin, which are injections. But don't worry, we've got it all under control. I'll get you seeing the diabetes nurse, and we'll get this stuff licked. Okay, Brian's in shock. As he gets up and walks out the door, I'm like, hey, but also, Brian, if you can lose a bit of weight and go to the gym, that would help as well. Okay, so Brian walks out. Yes, you've given lifestyle advice, but what does he take away? He takes away that, 99% of that conversation was that we didn't mention lifestyle, we mentioned this drug, and that they've got this under control for me. Cool, well, I can keep going doing what I'm doing. That sounds like I'm making this up, but that's an extreme example. I can guarantee you that is how some of these consultations go down. There will be people listening to this who have been in that consultation. Now, I'm not having to go at the doctor because I do recognize that things are challenging. But what about the same scenario where Brian comes in, you make eye contact with him, you don't look at your computer screen, you have a conversation with him, find out what he's concerned about, and then you say, hey, look, something actually has come up, Brian. Do you know anything about blood sugar? Well, a little bit. You explain, hey, your blood sugar is a little bit higher than we would ideally want. Now, it's actually gone into the range of something that we call type 2 diabetes. Do you know what that is? No, doctor, I don't know what that is. Okay, look, it's a condition that actually it doesn't develop overnight. You have not just got this in the last week or the last few months. This has been going on in your body for maybe 5 years, maybe even 10 years. This has been building up. Now, look, there are a couple of options. Yeah, there are some drugs that we sometimes need to use. But if you're open to this, I can help you look at your lifestyle and try and figure out with you what are the various factors that may have led to this. Are you interested? Hey, doc, yeah, if you can let me know what I can do, that would be amazing. And if you go down that road and you spend the time connecting and spend the time explaining to them what they can do and what they feel is achievable, I think even within 10 minutes, you can get a good result.
But this is communication.
Yeah.
Right? So why aren't medical schools training doctors to better communicate with patients, particularly if compliance is an issue? It seems like that should be part and parcel of what it means, to be trained as a doctor. Like you're going to spend your entire career communicating with patients, telling them what to do, what's wrong with them, et cetera. Shouldn't there be there's a skill to that, right? To do it effectively.
Yeah. One of the things I'd say from certainly when I was going through med school applications, and from what I understand, it's not really changed that much, although they have tried to evolve. That is not anywhere in literally how you are assessed. It is, what are your grades? Right? What is your interview like? Now, I guess an interview on some level is looking at your ability to communicate. I get that. But I think the health landscape has changed. What we needed in doctors 30 years ago is frankly not what we need in the bulk of our doctors today. It has moved on. And therefore, the skill set that a doctor requires in the 21st century is fundamentally different in my eyes than the skill set a doctor needed in the 20th century. So it is about saying, yes, we should be assessing it. I think that's important. But also we should be looking at, can we train it? Like, I think you probably can train it. You can teach people some skills of how you do that. How do you actively listen? How do you not interrupt the patient's story? Basic things that, frankly, I would argue it's not just about being a doctor. If you want to communicate with your partner, with your wife, with your children, right? It's the same skill set. So given that most of what we now see as doctors is driven by collective modern lifestyles, I say 80% is driven by collective modern lifestyles. Well, doesn't it not stand to reason that actually these sort of life skills that we need to be able to communicate effectively are probably top of the tree when it comes to being a doctor?
Yeah. Well, I think it is changing slowly. We're seeing the growth and the advent of functional medicine, and there are more and more people like yourselves who understand this and are stepping into a new way of practicing medicine. So I'm hopeful in that regard, but it does seem like there needs to be some systemic changes in updating the education and also the continuing education, right? I mean, you have to do all this continuing education all the time. Like, couldn't that be built into that as well?
I mean, Rich, what I'm trying to do to help this problem is, because I was talking about it in the media for years, right? I'm saying this is a problem, we need to change this. And I was thinking, yeah, but what do you do? It's all very well talking about it, but then what is the solution? I thought, I've hopefully inspired millions of people with my TV show showing that all these chronic lifestyle-driven conditions can absolutely be turned around, or certainly dramatically improved by making small changes to key areas in your lifestyle. And then I thought, with a colleague of mine, Dr. Ian Panja, we were like, you know what? Should we just set up a course? Should we just create one? And we did it. And we've created the first, in the UK and Europe, it's the very first course called Prescribing Lifestyle Medicine that is accredited by the Royal College of GPs. Now, that is important because it gives a certain gravitas to the course. It gives it a stamp of approval that people may not otherwise give it. And it was very hard to get accreditation. We had to jump through a lot of hoops. We probably had to compromise various aspects of the course that we ideally wanted, but nonetheless, we've done it. And we have a more than 95% of attendees so far. I think it's the best course they attended. Highly recommend it to their colleagues. And we have not just had primary care practitioners. We've had consultant cardiologists come, psychiatrists, nurses, pharmacists, because this is a problem that is systemic in medicine. Now, we probably trained nearly 1,000 healthcare professionals so far in the past 18 months, and we've got big plans on how to expand that. Now, people always say, you know what it's like, you do anything, and there's the naysayers. It's like, oh, that's fine, but it should be compulsory in medical school. Oh, that's fine, but you're never going to make change like that. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. 5 years ago, this course didn't exist. It certainly didn't have any credibility. This year, we've got a fully accredited course where people can come and get their CPD points. That is progress. At every single event, we invite some medical students for free to come. They come, give us feedback. We are talking to medical schools. This is how change happens. I'm not saying we'll get there, right? I don't know if we'll get there, but this is my effort to try and contribute to this process, to say, hey, look, this course is fantastic. Please come if you're interested. But, here's the problem, Rich. We're still relying on a doctor who has an interest, who is prepared to give up a Saturday and pay the money to come and train the course, right? So in many ways, you're only attracting the people who've got that interest, right?
Yeah, but you started, and you got to fan the flames of positive change, right? This is forward progress, so...
Yeah, and so hopefully in 5 years' time, this will be a part of medical school training, or it will be compulsory. We can only hope.
Right. Well, let's drill down into stress a little bit more deeply. This book opens up with you saying, listen, 60 to 80% of the people that come into my office have some kind of stress-related condition. The World Health Organization has qualified stress as the epidemic of the 21st century. Like, this is something that we really need to look at stringently and figure out protocols for redressing. And I feel like the word stress is used very cavalierly, like, wow, we're all stressed, I'm stressed out, I'm anxious, or whatever. But perhaps it might be beneficial to define the term. Like, when we say stress, what do we actually mean, and what is happening biologically, physiologically in the body when we are under this form of duress?
I mean, I would agree with you that the term is slightly problematic. I think we do use it. It is common parlance now. Not a day goes by where you do not hear the term, right? You talk to a buddy you've not spoken to in a while. Hey, mate, how you doing? You're yeah, mate, I'm okay. I'm not too bad. A little bit busy, a little bit stressed, but I'm okay. It's become that normal. And so I guess taking that 30,000 foot view, fundamentally what stress is, because stress is different for every single person. It is a perception. It is a perception when your body feels that it's under threat, that it is in danger. That fundamentally is what I think stress is. Now, how do you explain that? Because that statistic you mentioned, and it comes from the Journal of the American Medical Association, 2013, there was a paper where they did a little study, and they said that it's actually 70 to 90%, between 70 and 90% of all conditions that a primary care doctor sees in any given day is in some way related to stress.
That's bananas.
That is bananas, but I'm going to explain why I think it is quite easy to understand when you understand what the stress response is. So let's go back again 2 million years, right? 2, 3, whatever. We go back a couple of million years ago and understand how our stress response evolved. So we were, again, in our hunter-gatherer community, getting on with our business, doing what we need to do, and a wild predator is attacking or approaching. We get scared. In an instant, our stress response kicks into gear. So what happens then? Well, a series of physiological changes start to take place that are designed to keep us safe. So I can't list them all, but let's go through some of them. Your blood sugar starts to rise. Great. That means you're going to deliver more glucose to your brain. That is fantastic in that threat scenario. Your blood pressure starts to go up, so you can deliver more oxygen to your brain. Your amygdala, that's the emotional part of your brain, right? That becomes hyperreactive. So you are literally hypervigilant for all the threats around you. Your blood starts to become more prone to clotting, so that if you were to get attacked by that lion and that predator, you're not going to bleed to death. Your blood's going to clot. That's going to keep you safe. These are very, very smart, complex mechanisms that are designed to keep us safe. The problem is, quite simply, is that now in the 21st century, many of us are having our stress responses activated not to wild predators, but to our daily lives, to our email inboxes, to our to-do lists, to the fact that we've got competing demands at work, to the fact that two parents are working and someone's trying to rush home to pick up the kids, the fact that actually we're living separate from our family, so we're having to do all the childcare ourselves. We don't have grandparents around us, to the fact that we may have elderly parents now we're looking after, as well as looking after a young family. For many of us, that is activating our stress response. So what happens? Well, those mechanisms that are so helpful to us in the short term, they start to become problematic. Blood sugar going up is fine for 30 minutes. If your blood sugar is going up day in, day out, well, that leads to fatigue, obesity, high blood pressure, and ultimately type 2 diabetes just from being stressed. And I go back to saying what I said before, what the whole conversation around health is dominated by diet and movement. Talk about type 2 diabetes. It's all about which dietary tribe you subscribe to. I can tell you that stress is a very, very key player when it comes to your blood sugar. And I have put many cases of type 2 diabetes into remission. Yes, I changed their diet for sure, but when the diet plateaued, the way I got the blood sugar lower was by addressing their stress levels. So blood sugar problem, helpful in the short term, harmful in the long term. Blood pressure, again, same thing. Great if you're running away from a tiger. Great if you're in your spinning class in the gym. It's an appropriate response to that stressor. But if that's happening to your email inbox, that's a problem. What about your emotional brain, right? The amygdala. I just said, when you are trying to escape a predator, you become hypervigilant to all the threats around you. That is appropriate. If you go to downtown LA tonight and it is dark and you are walking down a dark street and you think somebody is following you, you know what? You want your amygdala to go on high alert. You want to be hypervigilant to all the threats around you. If that's happening day in, day out to your life, that's what we call anxiety, right? So suddenly, this very complex mechanism, when you simplify it right down, we can start to see why up to 90% of what I see as a doctor is in some way related to stress. But what about the things that it switches off, right? We've spoken a bit about relationships. So libido is a big problem these days. I've been practicing for nearly 20 years. I'm seeing more cases of low libido now than I've ever seen. Not a week goes by where I don't see a young male in their 20s complaining of low libido. This was not happening even 5 years ago, certainly in my practice. There are many factors to consider, but stress is probably the biggest in my view. Again, go back 2 million years. You are running away from a threat. In that moment, you need to prioritize survival. You do not need to be able to chill out and procreate with your partner.
Right.
So your body switches it off, right? It almost sounds overly simplistic, but I love simplicity because when you understand it simply, you start to realize, hey, I understand now why anxiety, why low memory, why poor concentration, why insomnia, why low libido, why hormonal problems, why obesity, why type 2 diabetes can all have stress as a key player. Gut problems, right? Last Mintel survey in the UK showed us that 80% of UK adults have complained of some form of GI problem in any given year, right? Now, food, of course, is a factor, but I would argue that stress is a bigger factor because what happens, again, just like libido, if you're running away from a lion, you don't need to be able to digest food. Just get switched off, just like that. And I tell you, one thing that I've discovered in my practice for maybe the last 2.5 years, a lot of people feel that they are reacting to certain foods. And I say that they are reacting, they're intolerant to certain foods. And I have gone through many years asking people to maybe avoid certain foods for a short period of time as a trial, then reintroduce and see what happens. But what I've discovered since I've really dialed into stress is sometimes people are actually not reacting to the food, they're reacting to the fact that they're eating in a stressed out state. So when I teach some of my patients breathing techniques, and I say, look, you really need to have some sort of switch off between your work and your eating. I am not casting judgment on anyone. I also often will buy my healthy, organic, whole food lunch, and I'll still be working and doing my emails whilst doing it, right? But you got to understand, you might be eating the right thing, but if you're not eating it in the right way, there could be a consequence. And some of these patients no longer react to those foods when they change their state before they eat, which literally was mind-blowing to me because those patients in the past, I had asked them to remove that food for a period of time. So it is so powerful. And I kind of reflect on the French when I think about this because there is this whole French paradox, right? You've heard of this, right? It's
right. Well, they eat all these crazy foods and they don't have the obesity problems and the chronic disease problems that we have. And so why is that? Is it their de-stressed lifestyle? They take, their meal times are sacred and elongated compared to, what we do here in America.
So, same in the UK. Look, I've recently been thinking about this a lot because there are multiple theories why the French paradox exists. But with the knowledge I now have on stress, I would have to say that there's a very powerful case to be made that actually the way they are eating means that actually their food is going to have a different impact on their body. It's going to do something different. If you prioritize a 90-minute lunch break where, hey, you know what, it's lunchtime. We're not doing that call. We're closing the computer. We're sitting down. We're chilling, and we are now going to have lunchtime, right? Of course, when you understand the stress response, it is going to do something different. And I actually had an interview with a French journalist last week because my first book has just come out in France. And I asked her at the end of that interview, I said, hey, look, can I ask you, does that still go on? I've spent a lot of time in France for skiing, for sure, but I was saying, does that still go on? She goes, yeah, by and large, it is still what goes on. Now, in some of the heavily urbanized places like Paris, in some of the companies where there's a lot of international people working there, it is starting to get eroded away, which kind of makes sense. But I don't know, I find it so interesting.
Well, I get the idea that when you're in a stress state, it restricts blood flow to your digestive system. But what is the impact on the microbiome, or why would that lead to some kind of allergic reaction to a certain kind of food?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not saying true allergy, and we've got to be very careful that we distinguish allergy from intolerance. That's a very different biological mechanism. So, I think it's important just to clarify that. If you have a true allergy, that when you eat some food, you get, red cheeks and your lips start to swell. I'm not saying in that instant. But I think some of these milder intolerances, or not so mild, many things happen. Your microbiome changes with stress. It's not just food that impacts your microbiome. Your stress levels do. That has been shown time and time again. Your digestive enzymes. So in order to digest food, whatever it is you're eating, you need the presence of certain digestive enzymes to digest that food. If you are switching off, as a very broad and non-precise term, your digestion, the levels of digestive enzymes go down. So it can affect multiple different organ systems. It can affect various different things in your gut. I have found over and over again now, not only for intolerances, that with gut problems, I am more and more focusing on the stress around how they eat. And I'm getting great results from doing it. I had a patient, right, who had Crohn's disease, right? So Crohn's disease, for people who don't know, is one of the inflammatory bowel diseases. People often have severe stomach cramps, They will often have, they have to go to the toilets maybe up to 15, 20 times a day. There'll be blood there. Very, very physically unpleasant, socially unpleasant. A few years ago, I had a patient who was under the gastroenterologists. She had tried the various drugs. They didn't work that well for her. She didn't like the way that they made her feel. So she ends up at my door. I started trying to help her. Now, granted, I did start with diet. I thought, okay, let's see if we can change some things. Let's see what happens. And we got a bit of an improvement for sure. And she was feeling motivated and inspired. I thought, okay, this is great. I'm finally getting some control over this condition. Then I don't see her for a little while and she plateaus. She comes in to see me. I haven't seen her maybe in 6 months. And I'm talking to her and she's like, Dr. Chatterjee, you've got to do something. What else do I need to do? What do I need to add into my diet? What do I need to cut out? She was talking really fast. And I started to unpick her life a little bit. And it was really clear to me. I was just picking up on this sense of background anxiety. She was rushing around. She was like many of the female patients I see in my practice. They were so caring. They were nurturing. She was looking after her husband. She was looking after the kids. Everything she did in her life was for somebody else. And she was not doing anything for herself. And there was many things to do. But the first thing I started off with her was I said, look, I know you want me to give you some more advice on your diets. I know you might want me to refer you to a nutrition professional maybe to go deep into this, but just hear me out. I think that's not the lever to turn at the moment. I think the background stress levels in your life are playing a role here, and I wonder if we could try something there. Now, she was resistant because in her head it was all about diet. So she wanted more dietary advice. And I said, look, all I want you to do is I want you to take a bit of time for yourself every day, just 15 minutes, right? So this is not deep breathing before a meal. This is just saying, look, do something for yourself, 15 minutes a day. And if you can, once a week, I want you to do something that you're really, really passionate about, that you've always wanted to do and you've never done. Anyway, so we also did what's called an MSQ, a medical symptom questionnaire. So I scored the level of her symptoms. She goes away. A month later, she comes back. She feels like a different person. Her symptoms have gone down by 50%. 50%. Now, she still has Crohn's disease. She still has symptoms. It's just significantly better. I said, what have you been doing? So, well, you know what? Every morning when I drop the kids at school, I now park the car, leave my phone in the car, and I go for a walk in the local park for 15 minutes. I said, okay, great. What else do you do? Doc, I've always wanted to do salsa dancing. Always. I've never done it, but you've given me the kick. So every Thursday night, I go to a salsa class. Now, this was just a month, Rich, but I have followed up, so I've seen what's consequently happened. What does this tell you? This tells you that there are multiple facets going on in everybody's life that can impact every organ system in the body. I have not got rid of her condition. She still has Crohn's disease, but it is a damn sight easier on her and easier to manage now that she started to lower her stress level. So when you ask the question, what is stress? Well, her stress, right, wasn't too many emails necessarily. Her stress was the fact that she didn't have enough passion in her life, that she didn't do anything for her, that made her feel complete, that nourished her. And so when you ask the question, what is stress? It's going to be different for different people. And that is fundamentally what I try to do with this book, is as completely as possible, simplify the topic, but then have these 4 concrete areas. So I want the reader to be able to identify, where does stress live in my life? Because you need awareness. Once you know where it lives, you know what? Pick one of the simple things, try it for 7 days, and see if you feel different. That is all I ask from someone.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that example that you just gave is that the stress in that woman's life wasn't some external pressure. It was an absence of something in her life, right? Which is not how we really think of stress. It was the fact that she didn't have something that was causing her that kind of duress, that was contributing to her symptoms. And it is interesting to kind of deconstruct stress and look at the different faces that it has. And you talk about this in the book. You talk about like the MSDs, the micro stress doses that we get throughout the day. It's not that stress is inherently bad. It's the chronic stress or the repetitive nature of these little micro doses of stress that we're getting all day long throughout our day within moments of waking up in the morning that culminate in this chronic stress condition that's creating all of these problems. But that's also very different from this thing that you call the adverse childhood experience, like the ACE, which is essentially the idea that we've all experienced traumas in our life, some more severe than others, whether it's a childhood trauma or some experience that you had that even though it was in the past, it still rears its head and contributes to your stress condition when it's sort of provoked through memory or some experience that you have throughout the day that reminds you of it.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges when I sat down to write this thing. It was, how do you explain what stress is? And how do you also differentiate these different kinds of stresses? Like you mentioned adverse childhood experiences. These are, really significant and traumatic things that happen, when you're a kid, whether it's abuse, whether it's maybe, not having parents, being an orphan, all kinds of things that we know impact all of your life outcomes. And I was trying to figure out, how can you describe this? And then I came up with this concept of micro stress doses and macro stress doses. And I'm so pleased that this has taken off. And like lots of people now use that in their classes. Lots of yoga instructors contact me on Instagram and say, hey, look, I'm using this as a way of describing to people the difference. And I think it's a very useful way of looking at your own life. So a micro stress dose is a little dose of stress that in isolation you can easily handle. But when they mount up one on top of the other, they start to add up and they can start to become problematic. So we have all got what I call our own personal stress threshold. And it will probably vary throughout various different days of the week, depending on what we've got going on, depending on how well we've slept, how many balls we're juggling. But we have this stress threshold. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you're feeling calm. You can start accumulating micro stress doses bit by bit. And the more of them you accumulate, the closer you get to your own stress threshold. When you get to your stress threshold, that is when things start to go wrong. That is when you have an unreasonable reaction to an email that you've received. That is when you have an argument with your partner. That is when you scream at your kids when they haven't actually done anything, because you have passed your threshold. And I make the case that many of us have had 10 to 15 hits of micro stress before we've walked out of the door in the morning. So what is what is a common scenario these days? Okay, work's stressful. I come back, I'm knackered, I want to unwind. I don't want to go to bed because then it all starts tomorrow. So I'm going to stay up late on Netflix, unwinding and numbing what is going on in my life. So I go to bed late. Right. I set my alarm for 6:30 in the morning because I've got work the next day. Okay, so you're in a deep sleep and at 6:30, your alarm goes off. Boom. Micro stress dose number 1, because jolting you from a deep sleep is a stressor on the body. You look at the time, which will be on your phone, you look at it, you know what? I've got a few more minutes. You press snooze. At 6:36, boom, alarm hits again, micro stress dose number 2. Then you think, you know what, I better get up now. So you grab your phone, whilst you're sort of stretching in bed, let me just look at my email. Oh man, there was 3 work emails yesterday. I didn't get round to doing them. I've got to do that today. MSD, micro stress dose number 3. Then you quickly go onto social media. Oh, you know what, someone's been mean to me on my last post. MSD number 4. Then you realize, oh my God, I've been in bed for 20 minutes. I'm running late now. I really need to get a move on. And I'm not going to keep sort of laboring the points, but you can very easily see how before you even leave the house in the morning, you've picked up 15 MSDs. And what does that mean? That means you are closer to your threshold, which means it's going to take less little hits of micro stress in the day to tip you over. This is why I'm so passionate about having some downtime, having some space in the morning to insulate yourself, make you more resilient. It's not just about reducing the stress in our life where we can. I get some people live difficult lives. Some people don't earn much money. They're working 2 jobs. That is fundamentally stressful. But if you can adopt some of these techniques, and pretty much every single tip in the book is free, and I'm super passionate about that they are accessible to everyone. You know what? You can apply these tools to make yourself more resilient to the stress. So let's say you've got a stressful life. If you're going out of the house with only 2 micro stress doses as opposed to 15, you've got a much bigger buffer before you start to have problems. And so I think that's a useful analogy. I will say though, even if you have had a macro stress dose, one of these big hits of stress, like trauma of some sort, like physical abuse. And I say this with the utmost respect. Of course, that needs processing. That needs probably to see a professional and actually untangle that. But if you talk to psychologists, if you talk to therapists, they will tell you that it is even more important in those situations that you apply these principles, because they will help keep you at a level that hopefully you can manage things a bit better than without. So it really, I really do believe that this is a book for everyone, whether you have macro stress doses, micro stress doses, whether you have too much stress in your life, or whether you have not enough passion, because these are universal themes. And I do think I have simplified it right down where people will think, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Maybe I can do that. I think I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I think you're absolutely right. And what I like about the book is that it's very practical and solution. I mean, it's called the stress solution. I mean, it's about the solutions, right? And some of these are very easy to implement in your life, like go for a walk, turn your phone off, go to bed early, like, very, very like simple implementable tools, morning routine, whatever that may look like for you, meditation, mindfulness practices. Some of them are a little bit more ephemeral. I mean, your first bucket here is purpose. And, that's a harder thing to kind of figure out for yourself. Everybody has their own relationship to purpose. And, I feel like there's a lot of people who live their lives relatively untethered and don't have a sense of purpose, or what, we both know the Okinawans call ikigai, which you talk about in the book. And that's a journey, right? So how do you help? I mean, I think that's fundamental, right? If you don't have purpose, then everything else is sort of a house of cards. Well, but that's the hardest one.
That's the hardest one. That's why I started the book with it, because it's the hardest. And I think it's the most important, because fundamentally a life lacking meaning and purpose is inherently a stressful life. Right? It just is. We all know that. The research backs it up. Not having a sense of meaning and purpose in your life is associated with much worse health outcomes. Of course, do we need science to tell us that? No, probably not.
And feeling bad about the fact that you don't know what your purpose is an added stress on top
Absolutely.
of that.
So let me clarify my view on this. So I thought, okay, this is all about practical solutions. Mm-hmm. I, like you, love that Japanese concept of ikigai. Right, I do. I came across it, I think, on a Facebook post a few years ago, and I was, one of my...
It's a Dan Buettner thing from Blue Zones.
I didn't come across it with Dan, actually.
He helped kind of usher it in, because Okinawa is one of the Blue Zones, and their relationship with purpose, which they call ikigai, is fundamental to their longevity and happiness.
For sure. And so one of my Facebook friends, so if you're watching the video, that was inverted commas friends, and to be fair, I'm being slightly... I'm sort of trying to make a point, which is probably not the best way of doing it. But I saw this post, and she put this thing up about ikigai, and I saw these 4 circles, and the middle area was shaded where these 4 things intersect. Mm-hmm. Ikigai is when you find something in your life to do, something that you love, something that you're good at, something that the world needs, and something that pays you money. And I read it, and I think I read this pretty soon after my dad died, which is a very significant moment, clearly, for me. And I remember reading that, and I thought, yeah, I like that. I fancy a bit of ikigai in my life. I want that. And I started to reflect on it and think about it. And then I thought, well, this could be useful for some of my patients. So I started to talk about this idea with my patients, and I found many of them found it quite stressful to think about. How can I find one thing in my life that gives me this sense of ikigai? That's just too stressful. I'm working to pay the bills and to meet the mortgage payments and to put food on my plate.
You feel ashamed that you can't master that.
And what was super interesting for me is in January, when the book came out in the UK and I was on my tour, I was in London and I spoke about this. And at the end, there was a Q&A, and this Japanese student in London put her hand up. So she asks a question. She says, Dr. Chatterjee, I just want to add to this that I have grown up in Japan, and I have heard about this concept of ikigai, and I found it super stressful my whole life, as I have to live up to this esteemed idea that is embedded in my culture, and I find it stressful and I can't do it. So that was super interesting. I heard that from my patients. I also heard it from a Japanese student in London. So I sort of pay homage to this in the book, but then I come up with what I call the LIVE framework. I've created a framework that I think, and I've seen very, very practical for people of how they start to find meaning and purpose in their life. Because I get it. You're listening to this podcast on a train and you're thinking, yeah, meaning and purpose, it's all very well for you two to talk about that. You know what? Your life is different from mine. So it's a very simple framework. L is for love, I is for intention, V is for vision, E is for engagement. Now, we don't necessarily need to unpack the whole thing, but the point about it is you don't need to get all of these from one aspect in your life. You can get them from different aspects in your life, but it's a simple way to start moving you towards finding your meaning and purpose. So what is the first L? The first L is love. It's about passion. Right, so research shows us that regularly doing things that you love helps to make you more resilient to stress. And I'm saying that resilience is super important. But at the same time, being stressed out day in, day out makes it harder to experience pleasure in day-to-day things. So one of the prescriptions I give people, and I don't particularly like the term prescription, but one of the recommendations I make is to have a daily dose of pleasure, even if just for 5 minutes. Now, again, just to bring this to life, I had a patient, 52-year-old chap, or maybe 53, early 50s chap, CFO of a local plastics company, right? Again, comes in to see me. He's worried, doctor, do I have depression? What's going on? I struggle to motivate myself sometimes. I can't concentrate at work. I feel quite indifferent about my relationships. What is going on? So, as always, I try and unpack different aspects of their lives. So, do you like your job? Yeah, not really. It's so-so. I have to do it. I've got a family I need to provide for them. I said, okay, fine. How's your relationship with your wife? You know what? So-so. I don't really see her that much. It's fine. Do you have any hobbies? Dog, I don't have time for hobbies. I'm busy. I kept back late. I said, okay, what about weekends? Weekends, I've got to do the household chores. I've got to take the kids to their classes. I don't have time for hobbies. So the prescription I gave him, the recommendation I made to him at the end of doing this, and again, so that I don't get, not that it matters if I get criticized, but just so people understand, I did do the safety netting that is required of me. I didn't feel he was an active suicide risk. I didn't do all these sort of various things that I have to do as a doctor. I did check. But ultimately, what I felt was that he didn't have any passion in his life, right? And I said, look, I know you don't do any hobbies now. Did you ever have a hobby? Well, yeah, I guess, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I loved playing with train sets. I said, okay, great. Do you have a train set at home? I've got one at home. It's in my attic. I've not seen it for years. I said, okay, look, what I would love you to do when you go home tonight is to get your train set out. Now, you've got a smirk on your face, right?
Yeah.
I get it.
Hey, I have no judgment on people's hobbies. I had a train set when I was a kid.
Well, I thought you were smirking at the fact that he came in to see me with a problem he was concerned about, and my prescription was to get out his train set.
Oh, no, I'm with you on that.
Okay, you're with me on that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
So he agrees to go and do this. So he goes away. I don't see him then. It is not uncommon in general practice in the UK for you not to be able to follow up every single patient. You just simply cannot do that. So I got on with my job. I was, doing my thing. 3 months later, I'd finished my morning clinic, and then we have something called home visits in the UK where normally after your morning clinic, you will then have a list from reception of people who are maybe elderly, infirm, who can't get out to the practice, and you go and visit them at home to look after them. So I went to the car park to go and do my home visits, and I bumped into his wife. And I said, hey, look, how's your husband getting on? He said, Dr. Chatterjee, I feel like I've got the guy I married back again. He comes home from work, he's straight onto his train set. He's on eBay all the time trying to buy collector's items, and he's subscribed to this monthly collector's magazine now, right? So she's happy.
He's wearing his conductor hat in the house.
Hey, but she's happy, but I still hadn't seen him, right?
Uh-huh.
Again, roughly 3 months later, I'm just going through my clinic as usual, and I see his name pop up, and he has had some blood tests at a well-manned check, and he's coming in to see me to go through them. Welcoming in, and before we go into the blood results, I say, hey, look, how are you getting on? He says, Doc, I feel like a different person. Life is great. I said, my mood's better. I've got energy. I said, okay, cool. How's your job? I love it. I'm really getting a lot out of my job now. How's your relationship with your wife? Really, really good. I feel really close to her. So, just like that case, I don't know how long we've been chatting for, maybe an hour ago, Just like that story about the kid who was feeling low and who had a friendship deficiency. Did this guy have a mental health problem? Sure, I think he had symptoms that would be consistent. I could have labeled him and given him a diagnosis, right? And of course, sometimes that may be appropriate, although I have issues with labels because I think what that does to people, that's a separate story. Or did this chap really have a deficiency of passion in his life? And the remarkable thing for me is when that passion deficiency gets corrected, not only does he feel better in himself, but everything else in his life starts to come back online. The job that he couldn't stand before, now he enjoys. The relationship that was a bit tired and he felt a bit indifferent about, now he's feeling closer to his wife. And, this is why I'm trying to make the case that this live framework is applicable. It is achievable. If you are listening to this and you want more meaning and purpose and you don't know where to start, I challenge you, when was the last time you did something you love, right? If you haven't done it recently, schedule it in your diary. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be swim run like we did at the start, right? For many of my patients, I say, give yourself 5 minutes a day for a daily dose of pleasure. That could be going for a walk. That could be reading a book, listening to a podcast. It could even be coming home from work, going onto YouTube, finding your favorite comedian and laughing for 5 minutes. So when we say meaning and purpose is unattainable for many people, I disagree, because if you start with small steps, you could call them hacks. I know you're not a huge fan of the hacking world, and I wouldn't call them hacking in the same sense. I'd call them, you want to get to a certain destination. The destination seems too far away. So let's look at a signpost that's nearby. Let's just break this down, make it super, super simple. Do something for 5 minutes a day that you enjoy. Do that consistently, week after week, and you will start to find other things in your life that will bring you closer to meaning and purpose. That's just the L, right? But I'm super passionate that we can all find meaning and purpose. Of course, it's harder. This guy didn't find his ikigai, right? This chap I just spoke about, he's not quit his job and is now living on a beach and living his kind of this romantic idea of what a beautiful life looks like. No, he's just found passion in his life, and suddenly his day-to-day life that was monotonous before suddenly is vibrant. And I'm so passionate about this, Rich, because it's not as hard as we think it is. Take small steps.
Small steps are everything. I think what happens is people, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but people see, read, hear this message of follow your passion, and it does have that shame-provoking, unintended consequence to it. And it just seems overwhelming and intimidating because that gets associated with quitting your job or, being a digital nomad or like making these massive, seismic shifts in your life. But that may be the ultimate trajectory if you keep pulling on that thread. Like maybe that train guy is going to reinvent himself and become some kind of, like toy train entrepreneur. Who knows? But more likely than not, it is just having the wherewithal to set aside a little bit of time to take a tiny step to like embrace some aspect of what you love. That's how it started with me. Like I went back to the swimming pool and jumped in the water. It was nothing more than that. And it's led to me sitting here with you in a manner I could have never predicted in a million years. But the tiny first step that seems meaningless and unconnected to ephemeral concepts like ikigai and passion is where all of these things are seated.
Yeah, for sure. And, this is such a fundamentally important point, not only under the umbrella term of stress, just for our overall well-being, how we feel about ourselves. It's very hard to do that without passion. It's very hard to do that unless there is some overarching objective or direction in your life where you are going. And I get it. Many people don't feel that they can have it. This is why I drill down, I think so hard, how do you make this achievable? How do you bring these kind of really lofty concepts and ideals, and how do you bring them right down to something That's someone who's working in a council flat, who's working 2 jobs, who feels that there is no way out to something that they can apply. And, I know this stuff works because I've been using these tips with real people with busy lives. And you pointed it out. That's it. It's not about necessarily that first step. Of course, that's very important. But who knows what that guy will be doing in 5 years? He's now on the road to that destination. Well, there is no destination, but he's on that road, on that journey towards meaning and purpose. And it starts with those small steps.
Mm-hmm. So we are headed into holiday season, the most stressful time of the year. By the time this podcast comes out, we'll be more in the thick of it. This is the moment where stress peaks. People are with their relatives. They're in high stress situations. There's a lot of pressure to show up for other people, and it pushes people over the edge. So I think it would be really helpful and instructive to kind of provide some guidance for how people can better navigate the minefields of the holiday season.
Yeah, sure. You're right. It is all over the world, I think. Well, certainly in the countries in which we live, it's a time fraught with problems, pressures, external pressures, things that we feel that we have to do. There are so many things that we can do, but the thing that is rising to the surface in me now is think about downtime, right? We need downtime. We thrive on downtime. Our brains thrive on downtime. You simply cannot get up, go on your phone, consume, watch what the world is giving you, reacting, go to after work drinks, go to all these family engagements, come back, lie in bed, consume more. You simply just cannot do that without there being a consequence. You will be accumulating micro stress dose after micro stress dose, and you will go over, and it will lead to family arguments. It will lead to a row with your partner. It will lead to you getting stressed out at work and falling out with your boss. It is all a consequence of that framework of micro stress doses and where is your stress threshold. You need to minimize the micro stress doses, and you need to take active steps to increase your resilience. So, well, let's call it simple. You mentioned a morning routine, right? I'm a huge fan of morning routines. And the framework I create for people is a morning routine has 3 M's, and the way I see it: mindfulness, movement, and mindset. So if you want a morning routine, you don't know where to start, think about those 3 M's. Now, you can personalize them to your own life. If you have got an hour in the morning, great. If you've got 5 minutes, you can still do it in 5 minutes. Mindfulness, that could be meditation. It could be breathing. Whatever you want can be mindfulness, whatever appeals to you. Movement, anything you want. Do some push-ups, do some yoga stretches. And then mindset. Mindset is do something to put you in a positive frame of mind. That can be reading a book that you enjoy that makes you feel good. It could be doing some affirmations like I often do with my daughter. Now, to really be clear on this, I have a patient in particular who says, "Doc, these morning routines, they sound great. I'm too busy. I've got to get the kids ready. I don't have time for this." I have persuaded her to try it, and she now sticks religiously to her 5-minute morning routine, right? So my own routine tends to be about half an hour. I have that luxury now. I didn't always, but hers is 5 minutes. So what does she do? Let's break those 3 M's down. First M, mindfulness. She does deep breathing for 1 minute when she gets up, right? She does a breath that I've taught her that I really like called the 3-4-5 breath. When she breathes in for 3, she holds for 4, and she breathes out for 5. Now, that is 1 breath. In the book, there is a whole breathing menu with 6 different breaths. If you don't like that one, don't do it. Choose one that you do like. So that's her 1 minute of breathing. Then what does she do? For her next 2 minutes, she does some sun salutations that she learned in a yoga class. Just 2 minutes. Then what she does, she reads a book that she likes. She keeps 5 books there, and she picks one. She reads a few pages. Just the act of having 5 minutes to herself in that morning actually transforms the rest of her day. This particular patient had really bad eczema. Her eczema has gone down dramatically since she started doing this morning routine. When you understand the physiology, of course that makes sense. Stress ultimately impacts the immune system. eczema actually, at its core, is a slight dysfunction of certain parts of the immune system. Therefore, if you can impact the immune system, you stand a chance that you actually might be able to reduce your eczema. Not in every case, but in this case. So have some time to yourself, really be mindful of that. And if you find a morning routine helpful, start there. Now, the next thing I'd probably say to people is think about how much you've moved, right? Yes, we know physical activity is important, but fundamentally, if we go back to 2 million years ago, when we think about our stress response, what is the stress response designed to do? It is priming us for physical activity. Nowadays, the stresses are coming in such a way like, we're sitting on our butts at our desk and our email inbox is stressing us out. Or the fact that actually, oh man, I am exhausted today, but everyone at work's going out tonight and then my sister's flying into town tonight. Oh man, I just want to go to sleep, right? So I would say, have you moved enough? Just ask yourself, have you moved? If you haven't, just make it a priority every day to do something. Even if it's a 10-minute walk at lunchtime, put your phone down, go outside for 10 minutes, and you will start to burn off that stress in your body. But those are two simple things, right? When you're traveling, if you're traveling to go and see your family, right? And this applies not in the holiday season as well, that people are traveling to work and they're getting stressed out. Use that travel time to really look after your mental health, right? Don't put the news on. Don't listen to what Trump has just tweeted, right? Own your mental space. Own what's going on in there. Use that time to listen to relaxing music. Listen to an inspiring podcast. Pull up the Calm meditation app on your phone and put your headphones in and meditate for 10 minutes. I am not asking you to do 3 hours of yoga every day, even though that will help you, right? I'm asking you to just think about, have I given myself a bit of time today? If you are getting stressed out at a party, your family are there, your mother is stressing you out, right? Your mother-in-law, let's say, or whatever, check in with your breath. It's a cliche. It is the biggest cliche, just breathe. If people understood what breathing actually does, on a fundamental physiological level, we would all be practicing it every day. Breathing is information for your body. When you're feeling stressed, when you've got deadlines that you're working away for, you will not realize, but your breathing will change. You will start to breathe more from your chest than your diaphragm. You'll breathe quicker. Your breaths will be more shallow. And what does that do? That sends messages to your brain that I am in danger, that there is a problem. And that gets you in a vicious loop where you start to breathe faster. Now, the great news about that is that you can very easily change that situation. If you consciously change your breathing, you can change your physiology. So if that's happening, you're at a party, whatever, there's a work do, you know what, maybe go to the restroom or go outside and just for 2 minutes, breathe. Do the 3-4-5 breath. If you don't like that one, do a box breath where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. I guarantee if you do that for 1 minute or 2 minutes, you will feel calmer, and the way you deal with that situation will absolutely, it will change. Mm-hmm. You will be less reactive. Alcohol, right? I get it. It's a time of year where people like to drink. Fine. I recognize that. That is something people associate with that time of year. Just be mindful of the fact that alcohol will trash your sleep, right? There's no other way of saying it. Alcohol trashes our sleep quality. If you've been out for a few nights on the bounce and you're tired, you know what? Learn to say no. Just look at your diary and go, you know what? Do I need to go to every single social engagement? Or can I go, I've gone to 2 this week. Maybe I'll just stay in one night. And, I'll reset my stress threshold by having an early night and going to bed. And then maybe I'll go out tomorrow night. If you're out drinking, maybe can you just reduce it a little bit? If you like to have a glass of wine when you're out, fine. Most people who drink, when you talk to them sober, will tell you, and I appreciate that everyone's different on this, but for most people, the enjoyment comes from that first drink. I shouldn't say for most, for many people, right? There's kind of diminishing returns after that. So, I mean, you may have a different perspective on this. I'm sort of...
I have a whole other thing on that, but go ahead.
Okay, no. I'm going to say some people, right? They will find that actually their enjoyment comes from that first drink, that just little feeling of unwind from the day. Maybe have that first drink, enjoy yourself, stay out, and then, I don't know, don't go overboard, because what happens in holiday season, and I've never really thought about this, never really been asked this, but what happens in holiday season is fundamentally your micro stress doses add up. There are more micro stress doses in your life, so you are operating near to your stress threshold much more than you ordinarily would. So anything that pulls you away from that is important. If you enjoyed that conversation, I think you are really going to enjoy the one I had with the former monk, Jay Shetty, on the simple things that you can do to train your mind. It's right there. Give it a listen and let me know what you think.
The monk mindset is about pursuing your truest goals, your truest self, and your most authentic, aligned goals.